Hello and welcome to another video from Gameplay for All Seasons. Today we're carrying on with our Hogwarts Legacy series, and today we're going to talk about the history of Hogwarts, or history around Hogwarts, or potentially you might call it the history of the Wizarding World. Now, even if you're not particularly interested in Hogwarts Legacy, we're just talking about history here, and if you like the Wizarding World, perhaps this may be something you might enjoy as well, so stay tuned if you're one of those people. So we're going to cover about 6 or 7 items here, which goes from the history in the late 1800s, which is when we think the Hogwarts Legacy, or when it has kind of been confirmed that the Hogwarts Legacy game will be set, which you can see on the website. But we don't know too much other than that. We don't know if it's going to be 1850s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. But what we can do is, because the Wizarding World is obviously so well established, we can actually look at some interesting events that have happened, which should tell us about some things we should be seeing depending when the game is set. Now, there is a lot of good information out there. There's a wiki on Harry Potter. That's great. Go check that out. We've also got Pottermore. Loads of good websites out where you can find this sort of information if you want to dig a little bit deeper. But just scratching the surface a little bit, these are some of the items. So we're going to start off with what happened in 1867 in Hogsmeade. Now, maybe not the most exciting, but this is something that we should see in the game, which is McHavelock's Wisdom headgear was established in Hogsmeade. Now, the reason I think that's quite interesting is because I imagine the game probably is going to be set after 1867, so I will definitely be looking out for that shop to make sure that they are consistent with the canon that's out there on the Wizarding World. So next up, we move to 1875, and this one's interesting, and it's discussed in the Harry Potter films and books, but the Ministry of Magic passes the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery. Now, obviously, that's going to really impact what you can and can't do outside of Hogwarts if it's set after 1875 in comparison if it's set before. So that's quite interesting, and it will be interesting to see how they make sure we stay in line with that. 1876, and now this is a big event that happened, so if we're there in 1876 we should see this. But the Hogwarts caretaker Rancorous Carp, probably got the name slightly wrong, but pronounced slightly wrong at least. But basically he tried to capture Peeves through an elaborate trap. Now, Peeves, from that, actually got a whole load of dangerous weapons, so they had to evacuate the whole school. Now, after 3 days of discussions with the headmistress, Eupraxia Mole, potentially, but that was reached, an agreement, and Peeves was given some more privileges. So that's an interesting one. If we're there at 1876, that is a particular event that happens, so they can use that, and that can be something that affects us, again, if they use that year. So then we move in a bit later now, so 1883. Now, at this point, Quidditch changes a little bit. So before 1883, so if the game is set before it, they used large baskets rather than scoring hoops. So that's an interesting one. So like I say, they could easily go a bit wrong if they don't know the history, which you imagine they will do, because all the people working on this probably really like Harry Potter or the Wizarding World. But yeah, so if it's set before 1883, we shouldn't see hoops, we should see baskets. So again, that's something to look out for. And if we're there in 1883, apparently there was a lot of discussion around it. People got very angry about the change in Quidditch. So again, there could be a bit of noise around that if it's 1883 we're there, which would be nice to sort of tie into. Now we're moving on to something that's probably quite well known by a lot of people. But in 1892, Albus Dumbledore starts his first year of Hogwarts. Now, I have done a video on the reason I personally hope that Albus Dumbledore is not in the game. And it's not because I don't think he's a good character, because I do. But if you want to check that out, I'll put that in the comments below. So go ahead and watch that video. But he sorted into Gryffindor. 3 years later, Aberforth Dumbledore also begins Hogwarts as well. And then he left Albus left in 1899, and he went off with a whole load of accolades. He was head boy, he won this, he won that. He was as you'd expect from Dumbledore, he just did really, really well. So if we're still there then you would expect potentially some noise around Albus Dumbledore leaving. I kind of don't expect us to be there that late, because if you say the late 1800s and then you're going August 1899, that really, really, really is the late 1800s. So I'm kind of thinking that it's probably going to be set a little bit early, so we probably won't see that, which is potentially a good thing, because one of the really big events that did happen as well in 1899 is that Eloise Mintumble become trapped for 5 days, 400 years or almost 500 years before that, in 1402, because it's something to do with a time turner, and what it did, it messed up all the time. People got unborn, there's all sorts of issues that were happening. She did eventually get back to the present, but her body did age all that time, and she died in hospital a short while later. So that's one of those events that's probably got disaster written all over it, because it's going to be very hard to maintain the canon, and it could get a bit messy with trying to work out the timings and things like that. People move through time, that's always a bit of a tricky one to do. So again, I imagine we'll finish before 1899 then. Now the last item I wanted to mention is from slightly before that, so it was 1896. So in 1896, a student successfully cheated on their ordinary wizarding levels. Now, potentially not the most groundbreaking, exciting thing, but it's one of those things that if you're that person who could potentially do that, maybe that'll be a bit of fun. I kind of probably would prefer not to, because I think, you know, that to be you, because I want to be someone who goes to school, feels like it's a proper school, really feel like you're part of something and feel very immersed in that side of it. So it kind of like then cheating at the end of it wouldn't be the most exciting thing. It feels like you should achieve something and you should learn, or you should get skilled from what you do, and that's what should give you your ordinary wizard levels, if that is something that we do in the game. But if they want to, and we're there in 1896, potentially we could be that person. So that's an interesting one there. So there's lots of other stuff that happens as well. Those are the main items I pulled out, which I think are interesting. I mean, there's a load of other things that goes on. We have a lot of changes in the Ministry of Magic, and things going on there. So potentially that could come into the game as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've liked it, subscribe. There's loads of other videos out there on Hogwarts Legacy, and I'm going to continue making them. So you don't want to miss out on those. Then subscribe. I hope you liked the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and I'll see you on the next video.